Hey, Jeremy Hood here from Restaurant Results Partners, and today I'm going to show you how to use ChatGPT to fix your restaurant business. And what we're going to do is first create a P&L that you'll need to feed it into Chat. So this is QuickBooks from our restaurants that we sold back in November. You should be able to do the same thing in any accounting. I have a saved P&L with this format, the way I like to read it, but I'm just going to show you how to go ahead and create it from scratch. So first, let's go back to some months where we have some data. Like I said, we sold this in November. All right, so this is probably what your standard P&L looks like. You really can't. I mean, you can see what your sales and expenses and profits were, but it really doesn't give you too much insight. You really need to compare it to a previous period, either last year or the month before. I like looking at both because last year, year-over-year comparisons are always nice, but they also can be unreliable because, like, we're here in Florida. Some years we have hurricanes, some years we don't. So, like, there's a lot of things that can fluctuate. And then looking at the month before, you want to look at current trends, but it's also tricky because some months have 28 days, some have 30, some have 31. There's holidays. There's all types of fluctuations. So you really kind of need to look at both prior year and prior period to get as much information as possible. And then the other thing that we want to add is a column for percent of income, because as you know, like food and labor, you want that to be under 60, 65%. And there's all sorts of industry standard benchmarks for utilities, rent, everything else. So you really need to know how much of percent of your income those expenses are. So it's super easy to add. First, in QuickBooks, I usually change this to non-zero and then compare another period. We're going to do previous year and percent change, and then also percent of income. Once you have those, you run it and see. Now we can see, okay, sales are up. Well, let's collapse this. So dining room sales are up, catering sales are down a good bit. And again, we'd have to look at last year. Maybe there was some football games that we didn't have this year. So this is a barbecue restaurant, so we did a lot of tailgate catering. Maybe there was more weddings last year. We just want to make sure that's not a trend going forward. And then you can see, we're operating a little bit better with food and labor. So now we have some things that we can look at. But if you didn't go to, I was fortunate enough to go to school and get my accounting degree. If you don't have that, you can still take advantage of ChatGPT to give you quite a bit of detailed instructions from this. So first thing we're going to do is export this to a PDF so that ChatGPT can read it. And then I created this custom ChatGPT to act like a CFO for you. If you want a copy, just shoot me a quick email, jeremy@restaurantresults.co. I'll put that in the description as well. But you can just go ahead and click on the button to get started. It's going to ask you for your P&L. What are you looking to get out of this advice? What goals do you have? What troubles are you having? So again, it's going to ask you for the P&L in that format that I just talked about, month over month, quarter over quarter, and then percent change between the periods, and then percent of total income. So goals, challenges. All right, let's just go ahead and throw this in here. Let's see, what else can we tell it we're struggling with? We'll say, feel like the labor cost is a little high. So it's pretty quick. It's crazy how sophisticated this thing is, and as you can see, it's already done. It's going to start. It's going to spit back what you told it, and then it's going to kind of dive into it. I'm going to pause this while it's right. All right, so it did its thing. It's going to just pull out the most important numbers from the P&L. Obviously food and labor, total sales, net income. And it's going to give you some observations. Catering sales are down a lot. We know that. Dining room sales are up a little bit. Labor costs were cut, but it still represent a large chunk of cost of goods sold. And profitability went up a lot as well. So then it's going to give you 5 actionable steps of what you should do with this information. So we told it we wanted to increase our catering sales, create a comeback offer for past clients, identify your top clients, reach out to them personally, and then also promote high margin, easy to execute catering packages, which will help minimize labor and food increases. And then, the next part, asking why did this catering drop? And these are some of the same questions that we talked about that any CFO would probably ask you. Like, did you lose some major accounts? Were there events last year that didn't happen this year? Understanding that is like kind of the key to what's going on. We told it we wanted to improve labor, so it's asking, are labor hours skewed towards dining room sales or catering? Are we even breaking those out between the two? And we're not. So that's one thing that you could start doing, is like start tracking all of your your catering labor, and only apply those to catering sales. Same thing for the dining room. And then, hey, your dining room sales are growing. Let's maximize on that. That's like, let's teach your employees the suggestive sell. Let's create some QR codes with different offers to bring them back in more frequently. That's where the traction is. Let's double down on that. And then here's some advice on how to monitor your labor efficiency. So sales per labor hour is a big number. If you're using any kind of modern POS system, you should be able to see this, and it should say, your hourly sales, and you can see what hours your labor is costing you this money. And in those hours, you can make sure that people are taking breaks, or you can adjust your schedule accordingly, or make sure that you're, doing cleaning or prep, or, really making use of that time where your labor cost is a little bit higher. So the other cool thing about this GPT is you can keep going with it. It's, it's going to ask you a few questions. If like you want to keep going, you can tell it whatever you want, like, help me build a labor tracker to separate catering and in-house. So it's going to build a table that you can copy and paste into Google Sheets. So anyways, this GPT is pretty powerful. Like I said, if you want to copy, just shoot me a quick email, jeremy@restaurantresults.co, and I'll send it to you. And I'd love to hear what you do with it.